Witness Roderick Wamil disputes Imee Marcos' interpretation that Vice President Sara Duterte is not the accountable officer for her office's confidential funds. Defense lawyer Michael Poa's possible conflict of interest is raised on the 13th day of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. The Supreme Court en banc dismisses as moot petitions that question the House proceedings on Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment complaints. Inflation eases to 6.2% in July as lower transport costs tempered overall price increases. And Ukraine accuses Russia of committing a war crime after a Russian drone chased a vegetable seller in Kherson. Witness Roderick Wamil disputes Senator Judge Imee Marcos' interpretation that Vice President Sara Duterte is not the accountable officer in relation to her office's confidential funds. Marcos claims it should be the disbursing officer during the 13th day of Duterte's impeachment trial. But Wamil says,
"That is not entirely correct po, Your Honor."
Both Wamil and Marcos cite the joint memorandum circular on auditing confidential and intelligence funds to support their respective views.
Ang liwanag sa inyong joint circular that the special disbursing officer is the one who was designated by the head of agency to have custody, di ba? And in the case of the OVP, si Acosta yon. In the case of DepEd, hindi ba si Fajarda yon?
Wamil says it is the responsibility of the head of the agency to approve the cash advances, oversee agency-wide utilization, and to ensure compliance with the joint circular. Marcos reacts and says,
Mag-yes or no ka lang, kanina ka pa inaaway mo ko lagi.
Amid the heated discussion, Marcos' staff advises her to cite the witness in contempt. Law expert Maria Lulu Reyes says in a Rappler panel interview, none of the provisions for a contempt citation was met in the case of Wamil. Reyes also adds Marcos should have been called out for her behavior, which the lawyer described as badgering the witness.
Diba? In the future, there should be minimum standards that they all agree on, meaning the senators, as to how they should treat witnesses. After all, these witnesses are witnesses for the people.
The issue of a possible conflict of interest for defense lawyer Michael Poa is brought up during the 13th day of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial on Wednesday, August 5. Senator Judge Rafi Tulfo asks if there is a possible conflict of interest on the part of Poa as a former DepEd Undersecretary. On August 4, a witness said Poa was in the meeting between the Commission on Audit, the Office of the Vice President, and the Department of Education regarding confidential funds in 2023. Presiding Officer Chis Escudero says there is no conflict of interest since Poa is only a counsel and the respondent to the impeachment case is not him but Vice President Sara Duterte. Private Prosecutor Lorna Capunan agrees with the presiding officer's ruling.
He is here acting in his capacity as lawyer.
Meantime, law expert Maria Lulu Reyes says in a Rappler panel interview that Poa does have a conflict of interest.
He placed himself in a position where he'll be required to testify as Chief of Staff and Undersecretary for Finance of the DepEd at the time when the Vice President was its secretary.
Reyes says Poa had intimate knowledge of how the confidential funds were used.
By making himself counsel of the Vice President, I think he's representing interest that is contrary to that of the Republic. If he is asked to testify on knowledge during the time that he was Undersecretary for Finance regarding the use of the confidential funds, he can simply escape and evade those answers by saying, I will not answer because it will breach attorney-client privilege.
Reyes notes Poa, quote, appears to be kinder than the previous defense lawyers.
We're so easily impressed by someone who does not reflect the brutish character of their client.
The Supreme Court en banc dismisses as moot consolidated petitions that questioned House proceedings on the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte. These petitions were filed by Duterte and allied lawyers led by Israelito Torreon. The latter petition argued the House Committee on Justice exceeded its constitutional authority in the hearings. It also questioned the House Committee on Justice's findings that the impeachment complaints were sufficient in form, substance, and grounds. The SC says, while the SC recognized that it may, in exceptional cases, decide issues that have become moot, it found that none of the recognized exceptions applied in this case. In a press briefer, the SC says the issues raised no longer required resolution because the House had already approved and transmitted the articles of impeachment to the Senate. The SC further held that the impeachment process had already moved to the Senate, which had convened as an impeachment court and had begun proceedings. Meantime, House Prosecutor Terry Ridon says the SC's decision ends claims of a fishing expedition.
Ibig sabihin po nito, lahat po ng usapin patungkol sa mini-trial fishing expedition na kanina nakita ho natin, inulit-ulit na naman po ng depensa ay nagwawakas ngayong araw po na ito.
The Philippine Statistics Authority reports inflation softened to 6.2% in July as the relative slowdown in transport costs helped temper overall price increases. This is slightly lower than the 6.4% recorded in June. This also marks the third straight month of easing inflation after the rate hit a 3-year high of 7.2% in April. Average inflation for January to July stood at 5%, remaining well above the government's target range of 2 to 4%. Transport was the biggest source of the slowdown, accounting for 57.4% of the decline in the headline rate. But several major expenses continued to drive inflation higher. Inflation in housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels rose to 8.2% from 8.1%, mainly due to a jump in electricity inflation to 17% from 12.3%. Electricity inflation was the fastest since March 2023. Ukraine accuses Russia of committing a war crime. This after a video was released showing a drone chasing and wounding a vegetable seller in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. The video was released by Ukrainian police. The drone later exploded as the man dove behind his vehicle for cover. Police say the man in his 50s survived but suffered shock and shrapnel injuries. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says it's proof that Russia has gone mad and its soldiers take pleasure in killing and abusing civilians. He also calls for more pressure on Moscow and strong security guarantees for Ukraine. And that's today's wrap. I'm JC Gotinga. Thank you for watching. Click the link below for the full story. For more updates, download the wRap.